Believe it or not, we were living in the Bronx. And I was, my gosh, I don't think I can be more than 12 or 13. And there was a grocery store run by Jewish people downstairs from my apartment building. And I got a job with them delivering groceries to the building. So I don't know if you call that a job, but it was a job. Because eventually I started stacking soda bottles and I started cleaning up the store. And I was only 13, maybe 12. And then my next job after that was I moved to Cambria Heights. And I hung around all my friends, it was a group, hung around a diner, but it was sort of like a soda fountain. And the guy there took a liking to me, and he gave me a job after school, and he paid me $1 a day and a cup of coffee and a piece of pie. And what I did was I came to work and I went into the back and I cleaned all the pots and pans that they'd done during the day cooking. Man, it was like a pile up to the ceiling when I went in. I met my wife then. I met Pam, and we fell in love, and she hung around with me there. So what we had in the store was a diner, okay? So on one side of the store, you had these booths where people could sit. The middle of the store, you had a counter with stools by it. And on the end of the counter, you had places that you could pull down for seltzer. And then behind there, you had all the glasses and stuff. You also had hot plates there where you could keep food hot and you would serve lunches. Not dinners, but mostly lunches. And you would go in there and you would order a Coke. And the Coke was, they put Coke syrup in a cup or a glass, they poured a seltzer in it, and that's what you got. If you wanted an ice cream soda, they would throw a lump of ice cream in there. So that's the way it was. That's what a soda fountain was. It was all mirrors behind it. And kids hung out there. We had a jukebox. We played music, because we started working late at night on Friday nights. There was a school that had dances. And the dancers got out, and all those teenagers would come back about 11 o'clock at night. So I stayed there and I worked at night, and then I cleaned up at night. And that's kind of what I did. I was able, after a while, to make sodas. Now, I did bus tables, and I would get tips on the table, so I was doing pretty good. And actually, it's from there that I went into the Navy. So I never really had a full-time job up until that point. I did work with my father for a week or so as an errand boy for a printing factory downtown, but I was really too young for that, and it didn't work out. So I went in the Navy, which of course was 4 years of a job. And when I came out, Pam was pregnant with Janice. And so I couldn't just get out. I had to have a job when I got out. And so I took a week off prior to my discharge. And I went and I looked for jobs. And I applied for an airline. And I applied for a shoe store called Baker Shoes. And when I got out, I got called to Baker Shoes. My first day was downtown in Washington, D.C. And it was George Washington's birthday, which is just a tremendous sales day. And no one in the store could help me do anything. So I just kind of stood in the back counting boxes and trying to learn codes. And so when I got home that night, I had a call from the airline. And they offered me a job. And so I went to the airline. The guy called me from the shoe store because he wanted me. Because I was pretty, I was pretty employable. I was discharged. I was 20 years old. I was married. I had a family coming. So I was a pretty good applicant, for a company to hire. So I went for the airline. I was loading and unloading airplanes. Was my first job. And that then turned out where I ended up because I needed more money. I had borrowed money from my dad to pay for the hospital bill for my daughter. And that was $900. but I borrowed $1,000. And to pay him back, I had to get another job. And what I did was I would drive with 4 or 5 guys to another distance where somebody dropped off rental cars, and we would drop them back. And I drive to New York. It took all night and practically all day the next day. You get $25 cash. And then the next place was Baltimore Airport, and that was $3. And you could do about 6 runs overnight, 7 runs overnight. And I made a little bit of money that way, but I got really, really tired because I wasn't getting any sleep. It was hard. And so I looked for a regular part-time job. And that's when my mother had a friend in the neighborhood. His name was Don Berggroff, who was a manager of a 7-Eleven. And he offered me a job as a part-time clerk. And I went to work there, and I ended up working 40 hours a week there as a part-time clerk. So 2 days a week, I worked 8 hours a day at the airline. 2 days a week, I worked 8 hours a day at 7-Eleven. But 3 days a week, I worked at 7-Eleven and the airline. So for 3 days was a motherfucker. Excuse my language. I did well. I said if I would quit the airline, they'd offer me a full-time job and an assistant manager's job. So I did that. Like I couldn't continue doing both of them. And I really liked 7-Eleven because you could really work and get promoted real quick. It was a self-promoted, it was a growing company. To tell you how much it was growing, when I worked for them, there was 500 stores. 25 years later, when I left them, there was 10,000 stores. And today there's 40,000 of them around the world. But anyway, they were growing at a pretty good pace. And I went to work, and after about a year, I got my own store. And that was in an apartment building. And then from there, I got what they called the street store. I was there for about 2 months, and they offered me a job as an auditor, which was a good job because you were off on weekends, and you ordered at 2 stores a day, and then you were done. But you didn't have the responsibility for running the store. So whether the store made money or not, or whether it had enough help or not, I didn't have to worry about that. And I did that for about a year. And then they promoted me again to a supervisor. Now I was young. I was only about 34 years old. And these jobs started to put pressure on me, a lot of pressure. And as a supervisor, I had 6, 7 stores that I was responsible in every way for 6 years. And I worked for a guy that was just a sadist. I mean, literally was a sadist. He got promoted somewhere else. And a guy I really liked by the name of Walt Bronda, who was a zone manager, asked me to be a district manager. And that was a really great time of my life. Now there I had 33 stores, but I had 4 supervisors working for me. I mean, I didn't have to go work in the stores. I was off on weekends. I was off at night. I was still responsible for a lot of stuff, but not directly. It wasn't as bad as being a supervisor. And I did that for about 5 years when the vice president called me in his office and asked me to take a job as zone manager up in Delaware. And it was half of New Jersey and all of the state of Delaware. And it was a corporate-run stores. And they were having problems with running corporate stores in the franchise zone division. And so I went in there and started straightening that place out. It was a mess. And I did that for 6, 7 years. When they offered me a job as director of minority and economic developments for the region, which was all up from Chicago, all up New York, all the way down Virginia. It's a whole quarter of the country. And I worked for the consultant. He was really a good guy. And he was a white guy, but he was on the board of directors of the NAACP because he had so many contacts with businesses. You know, NAACP needs money. They need to be involved in businesses. And so we got him involved with 7-Eleven. And my job was to hook up district managers for NAACP with district managers from 7-Eleven, and they would start working together to get franchises for black people, to hire black people as managers, to get back merchants. So in other words, it's really helped the black community. Unfortunately, the company decided to go private. And what happened was the sons bought up all the stock, except the stock became more and more and more expensive. I forget the reason why. But a good example was stock I had gotten for $20. I was able to sell back to them for $75. So I made a pretty good bundle there. I got the cash. But as part of that, I lost that job, and the Japanese took over. I had a heart attack when I was 35, and I was over that, but it enabled me to get disability from 7-Eleven, which was really was good. It was 65% of my old pay plan, and I was making $65,000 a year, which back then, if you look it up, was like $150,000 today. And I was able to get 65% of that for the rest of my life, and then I was able to get Social Security disability. So I was doing pretty good, you know, I was like a fat cat. But I'd started doing stupid stuff. I had a real nice townhouse in Delaware and a really nice condominium in Ocean City, Maryland. So then I decided I wanted to build a big house in Ocean City, Maryland, because my parents were living out there. My in-laws were living out there. And I built this house for $280,000, which I shouldn't have done because I had to sell my other two pieces of real estate to do that. And from that point on, I just kept spending money until I was, I never got really broke, but I got to where I don't have a lot of money now. And if I would have played my cards right, I would have, $1 million by now because of the profit sharing and all of that stuff would have just built up. And that was kind of the series of jobs that I had through my lifetime. I learned a lot on every job. I got along well with all my bosses. I think I did a good job. And I enjoyed all my jobs. I learned from them and I enjoyed them and I enjoyed the people that I worked with. So I never saw my jobs as a burden. I always looked forward to them. I'd always get in the morning and look forward to going.